1982, Lake Baikal, Siberia. The oldest and deepest body of freshwater on Earth. Under 2 meters of thick ice, the Soviet military is conducting secret training missions with elite combat divers. But at 50 meters deep, these men trained for war encounter something that defies physics. They find the swimmers. Humanoid entities over 3 meters tall, moving through freezing water without oxygen tanks or gear. What followed was an unequal battle between human technology and an unknown force. 7 men went into the water, but only a few came out whole. This is the story of the strangest incident in Soviet military history. Let's go deep into the well. Lake Baikal is not a normal lake. Russians call it the Sacred Sea. It is so deep it could swallow all the mountains of Europe. In the winter of 1982, the region was a crucial strategic point for the Soviet Union. Because of its extreme depth and isolation, the military used the lake to test new underwater monitoring technologies and to train combat divers, known as frogmen. These men were Russia's toughest soldiers. They were used to navigating in total darkness, at temperatures that would stop a normal human heart. They saw Baikal as their own fortress, a place where no foreign power could enter without being detected. The team of 7 divers that went on that specific mission was led by experienced officers. The plan was simple, a routine dive to check acoustic sensors placed on the lake floor. They were equipped with the best thermal suits and state-of-the-art oxygen tanks. The air outside was so cold it took your breath away, but under the ice, the water was calm and had an eerie clarity. The divers descended one by one through a hole cut in the ice, entering a world of absolute silence. They were the masters of the depths and believed that nothing below could surprise them. But Baikal held a secret millions of years old, a secret that did not want to be discovered by the army of man. As the team descended toward the 50-meter mark, the visibility began to change. Normally, the water in Baikal is so clean you can see for dozens of meters. However, at that depth, the sunlight was only a pale memory above the layer of ice. The divers' powerful flashlights cut through the darkness like blades of light. Suddenly, one of the soldiers made a desperate sign to the team leader. He pointed his finger into the darkness in front of them. At first, the others thought it was an optical effect caused by nitrogen, a kind of deep-sea drunkenness that can trick the mind. But it was not a hallucination. Out of the shadows, 3 figures appeared. They were not enemy divers. They were enormous. These beings were over 3 meters tall, much larger than any human. What terrified the Soviet soldiers was their equipment, or rather, the lack of it. The entities wore no oxygen tanks, no face masks, and no fins. They wore only tight, silvery suits that shimmered under the flashlights. The only thing visible on their heads was a spherical, transparent helmet, through which no human features could be seen, only a dark void. They moved through the water with incredible speed, much faster than the laws of physics should allow for a creature of that size. Instead of retreating, the team leader made a decision that would destroy everyone's destiny. Soviet military training did not accept the unknown. If something was in their waters without permission, it had to be identified and, if possible, captured. Through hand signals, the officer ordered the team to deploy and try to catch one of those beings. The divers pulled out capture nets, steel wire tools designed to immobilize enemy divers. It was a move of incredible arrogance. These men were trying to hunt entities that seemed to belong to another world using primitive methods. The silvery beings did not seem afraid. They stopped swimming and remained motionless, floating vertically in the water column. They seemed to observe the humans' attempt with cold curiosity. When the Soviet divers approached within 10 meters, ready to throw the nets, the atmosphere changed abruptly. There was no hand-to-hand combat, no physical blow. The entities simply raised their hands toward the soldiers. At that moment, the water around them began to vibrate with an intensity that made their teeth chatter. It was a technology or a biological power that human science could not explain. The team leader felt his lungs being crushed by an invisible force, and in the next second, all control of the situation vanished in a blast of underwater pressure. Suddenly, a massive force, like a shockwave, hit all 7 divers at the same time. It was a violent ejection. This unknown energy propelled the soldiers toward the surface at a dizzying speed. In deep-sea diving, this is the greatest possible danger. To survive, a diver must ascend very slowly, making decompression stops to let nitrogen leave the blood. If you rise too fast, the nitrogen turns into bubbles that block your arteries and destroy your organs. It is as if your blood begins to boil inside your veins. The soldiers were thrown toward the ice like champagne corks. They could do nothing to stop themselves. The force of the entities was so great that it projected them through the water column in just a few seconds. The pain was instantaneous and unbearable. Their heads felt as if they were about to explode, and their joints were torn by the pressure of the expanding gas. When they finally broke the surface, shattering the thin layer of ice around the hole, they began to scream. They were 7 men who, minutes before, were the pride of the army, and now they were just broken bodies spitting blood on the white Siberian snow. The entities remained below, in the silence of the deep, protecting their territory without making a single mistake. The support team on the surface panicked. They saw their colleagues' bodies shoot out of the water and collapse onto the ice. They knew immediately what had happened: decompression sickness in its most severe form. The only chance for survival was a hyperbaric chamber, a metal tank where pressure is increased again to dissolve the nitrogen bubbles. But there was a major problem. Their training station had only one small decompression chamber, designed for at most 2 people at a time. Outside, there were 7 men dying every second. The base leader made a desperate and tragic decision. He ordered all 7 divers to be crammed into that small chamber. They hoped that if they increased the pressure to the maximum, they could save everyone at once. It was a fatal mistake. The moment they activated the system, due to the overcrowding and the critical state of the men, the chamber failed. The 3 soldiers who were closest to the chamber door died instantly. The other 4 survived, but at the cost of permanent physical and mental trauma. Their lives as soldiers ended that winter afternoon. They had not been defeated by a human enemy, but by something they couldn't even describe without sounding insane to a court-martial. When the survivors were able to speak, their report sent shockwaves all the way to Moscow. They talked about the silver swimmers. They described beings that didn't seem to need air, creatures that possessed technology that could manipulate the water itself. The Russian Secret Service immediately took over the case. The survivors were separated and interrogated for months in secret bases. They were told that what they saw were American miniature submarines or the effects of hallucinations. But the soldiers insisted. They saw those empty eyes behind the transparent helmets. Russian intelligence officers began searching the archives and discovered that this was not the first incident. Locals around Lake Baikal had for centuries told stories of the pharaohs of the lake or lights that enter and exit the water without making waves. The hypothesis was raised that these beings were not aliens from space, but an ancient underwater civilization that had lived in the depths of Baikal since before the appearance of man. The lake, being so isolated and deep, would be the perfect place to hide such a presence. The final report was marked top secret. The army realized that there are places on the map where man is just an uninvited guest. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union was obsessed with military parity with the US. The idea that there was a power greater than theirs in their own lake was unacceptable to the leaders in the Kremlin. New expeditions were sent, but this time the divers were equipped with special sensors and underwater cameras. They tried to find the silver swimmers again, but the entities seemed to have disappeared into the abyss. It is possible that they felt the presence of human technology and retreated into the immense underwater caves that have not been explored to this day. Researchers who tried to study magnetic anomalies in the lake were stopped by the army. Listening bases were built on the lake floor, but reports often indicated strange metallic sounds coming from the deepest areas, sounds that resembled nothing produced by man. It is rumored that some Soviet officials believed these entities were guardians of a resource or a portal to another dimension. What is certain is that after 1982, deep water training in Baikal was drastically reduced. The fear of meeting the shockwave of the swimmers again was greater than the desire to conquer the depths. The Russian army learned a hard lesson: in the heart of Siberia, ice is not the only thing that can freeze your blood. The 3 divers who survived were marked for life. Rapid decompression left them with severe neurological scars. One of them could never walk normally again, and the other two suffered from constant nightmares in which they drowned in silvery water. The Soviet state provided them with military pensions and moved them to closed cities, where they could not talk to the press or strangers. They became living ghosts of a war that officially never existed. Being men of honor, they kept silent for decades, but their eyes betrayed a horror that words could not express. It was only after the fall of the Soviet Union that some of these stories began to surface. Former high-ranking officers began to speak about the Baikal file. It was learned that the rescue team that pulled the divers out of the water was forced to sign documents stating they had seen nothing unusual. The trauma of these men was double: physical from the accident, and psychological from the obligation to lie about the reality of what they saw. They knew the swimmers were there, under the ice, and that humanity was completely unprepared for a confrontation with them. Their survival was a miracle, but it came with the curse of being the only ones who knew the truth in a world that prefers comfortable lies. Today, Lake Baikal remains as majestic and mysterious as ever. Tourists come to admire its ice, transparent as a mirror, but few think about what lies a kilometer beneath their feet. The 1982 incident remains a dark spot in the history of Russian diving. Some say the swimmers are still there, hibernating in the cold current, waiting for humans to make the mistake of disturbing them again. The lesson left by the 7 divers is one of humility. We like to believe we have mapped everything, that we are the masters of the planet, but the earth and the waters still hide secrets that can destroy us in a second. This story is not just about a military accident, but about our encounter with the absolute unknown. The silver swimmers did not want to conquer us, only to be left alone. They are the guardians of a world we have no right to claim. When you look into the deep waters of Baikal, remember that someone might be looking back from a world where time and gravity have different rules. Subscribe, ring the bell, and thanks for watching. Don't forget. I'll see you at the bottom of the well.